The 1950s, a time of change. From the ashes of World War II, a new sound emerged, raw and electrifying. This was rock and roll, a musical revolution that would change the world forever. Pioneers like Chuck Berry and Little Richard gave voice to a generation yearning for something more. Elvis Presley, the undisputed king of rock and roll, burst onto the scene with his hip-shaking moves and soulful voice. Rock and roll was more than just music. It was an attitude, a statement of freedom and individuality. It broke down racial barriers, bringing black and white youth together in a shared love of the music. As rock and roll swept the globe, its raw energy began to evolve. In the hands of bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, the music took on a harder edge. The Beatles brought a new depth to the genre. The Rolling Stones embodied the rebellious spirit of rock and roll with their bluesy sound. These bands laid the groundwork for the heavier sounds that would emerge in the following decades. This new wave of music was heavier, louder, and more aggressive, reflecting the growing social and political unrest. From the ashes of the Vietnam War, a new generation emerged, finding solace in the raw power of this evolving genre.
The rise of heavy metal wasn't just a musical phenomenon, it was a cultural one. It gave rise to a new subculture, a community of outsiders who found solace in the music's raw energy. Concerts became tribal gatherings, where fans could come together to celebrate their shared passion. The music provided an outlet for emotions often suppressed in mainstream society. It was a way to channel anger, frustration, and alienation into something positive. Heavy metal was a source of empowerment, a way to challenge the status quo and express individuality. As the 1960s drew to a close, a new sound emerged from Birmingham, England. Heavier, darker, and more ominous, it was a sound that would define a generation heavy metal. At the forefront stood Black Sabbath, a band whose name would become synonymous with the genre's signature sound. Formed in 1968, Black Sabbath was comprised of Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward. Their music was gritty, industrial, and infused with working-class disillusionment. Iommi's down-tuned guitars created a heavier, more menacing sound. Black Sabbath's self-titled debut album, released in 1970, was a revelation. Their music resonated with those who felt alienated, offering a sense of community and belonging. Central to Black Sabbath's sound was Tony Iommi's innovative guitar work. His use of down-tuned guitars created a heavier, sludgier sound. Iommi's riffs were monolithic structures, heavy with dread and foreboding. Songs like Iron Man and Paranoid featured iconic riffs that became anthems of heavy metal. Beyond their heaviness, Iommi's riffs were incredibly melodic. This combination of heaviness and melody became a defining characteristic of heavy metal. Black Sabbath's influence on heavy metal cannot be overstated. While Black Sabbath's music was heavy, their lyrics added depth and complexity. Unlike many contemporaries, their songs weren't just about love or partying. They explored darker themes like war, social injustice, and drug addiction. Bassist Geezer Butler, the band's primary lyricist, drew inspiration from horror films, the occult, and personal experiences. Songs like War Pigs condemned the horrors of war, while Electric Funeral painted a bleak picture of nuclear annihilation. Black Sabbath's willingness to tackle such themes set them apart. Their lyrics resonated with listeners looking for more than just escapism.
Black Sabbath's dark imagery and controversial lyrics did not go unnoticed. The band quickly found themselves at the center of a media firestorm, accused of promoting Satanism. Religious groups denounced their music as the devil's music. Despite the controversy, Black Sabbath's popularity soared. Their rebellious image and defiant attitude enhanced their appeal. Heavy metal, with its dark themes and aggressive sound, was at the forefront of a cultural clash. Black Sabbath's unwavering commitment to their art solidified their status as legends.
As Black Sabbath's influence spread, a new wave of bands emerged. Judas Priest brought melody and theatricality to the genre. Motorhead injected punk rock energy and attitude into heavy metal. Deep Purple expanded the sonic palette of heavy metal with their blend of classical and rock influences. Kiss captivated audiences with their elaborate stage shows and pyrotechnics. These bands helped shape the sound and direction of heavy metal throughout the 1970s. Heavy metal was becoming a diverse and vibrant musical force.
As the 1970s gave way to the 1980s, a new breed of heavy metal band emerged. From Los Angeles came Metallica, a band whose raw energy and technical prowess redefined heavy metal. Formed in 1981, Metallica's early lineup included Lars Ulrich, James Hetfield, Dave Mustaine, and Ron McGovney. Their debut album, Kill 'Em All, released in 1983, was a sonic explosion. Tracks like Hit the Lights and Seek and Destroy showcased their blistering speed and intricate riffs. Their second album, Ride the Lightning, released in 1984, expanded on their raw aggression with more complex arrangements. Tracks like Fade to Black and For Whom the Bell Tolls revealed a depth and emotional range rarely seen in heavy metal. Metallica, along with Slayer, Megadeth, and Anthrax, spearheaded a new subgenre thrash. Characterized by breakneck tempos and aggressive vocals, thrash metal became the defining sound of the 1980s. Metallica's contribution to thrash was significant. Their music blended speed, aggression, and musicality. Their 1986 album Master of Puppets is a landmark in thrash metal. Lyrically, the album tackled themes of manipulation and war. Thrash metal, with Metallica at the forefront, became a global phenomenon. Following the death of bassist Cliff Burton, Metallica faced their greatest challenge. Determined to carry on, they recruited Jason Newsted and channeled their grief into And Justice for All. The album addressed themes of social injustice and political corruption. Songs like One and Blackened showcased their willingness to tackle weighty issues. Musically, the album was darker and more experimental. Despite its density, And Justice for All was a critical and commercial success. Metallica's status as one of the biggest metal bands in the world was solidified. Section 4. Metallica's Black Album breaking boundaries and reaching new heights. In 1991, Metallica released their self-titled fifth studio album, often referred to as the Black Album. Produced by Bob Rock, known for his work with hard rock acts like Aerosmith and Motley Crue, the album marked a significant shift in the band's sound and direction. The Black Album was a more commercially accessible album than anything Metallica had released before. It retained their signature heaviness, but incorporated more melodic elements, stronger vocal hooks, and a cleaner, more polished production. The songs were shorter and more radio-friendly, without sacrificing the band's raw power and intensity. The album was a massive commercial success, selling over 30 million copies worldwide and topping the charts in numerous countries. It spawned a string of hit singles, including Enter Sandman, Nothing Else Matters, The Unforgiven, and Wherever I May Roam, that introduced Metallica to a whole new audience. While some longtime fans criticized the band for going mainstream, the Black Album remains Metallica's most commercially successful and arguably influential album. It broke down barriers between heavy metal and the mainstream, proving that metal could be both commercially viable and artistically credible. Section 5. A legacy of innovation and influence. Metallica's impact on the evolution of heavy metal is undeniable. They took the raw energy of early metal, injected it with the speed and aggression of punk and hardcore, and added a level of musicality and lyrical depth that elevated them above their peers. They were not content to simply follow trends, they were innovators, constantly pushing the boundaries of what was possible within the genre. From the blistering thrash of their early albums to the experimental sounds of And Justice for All and the commercial success of the Black Album, Metallica has consistently challenged themselves and their audience, refusing to be pigeonholed or confined by genre conventions. Their influence can be heard in countless bands across a wide range of heavy metal subgenres. They inspired a new generation of musicians to pick up instruments, form bands, and push the limits of heavy music. Their music continues to resonate with audiences of all ages, solidifying their status as one of the greatest and most influential metal bands of all time.
As the 1980s gave way to the 1990s, the heavy metal landscape began to shift once more. The raw aggression of thrash had reached its peak, and a new generation of musicians, weaned on a diverse diet of metal, hip-hop, and alternative rock, were searching for a sound that reflected the angst and alienation of the post-Cold War era. A new sonic storm was brewing, one that would challenge the conventions of heavy metal and give birth to a subgenre as controversial as it was popular: nu metal. The seeds of nu metal were sown in the underground music scenes of Los Angeles and other cities across America. Bands like Rage Against the Machine, with their politically charged lyrics and explosive fusion of rap and rock, and Tool, with their dark, atmospheric soundscapes and introspective lyrics, were early pioneers of the movement. These bands rejected the traditional heavy metal focus on speed and technicality, opting instead for a more groove-oriented sound, incorporating elements of funk, hip-hop, and industrial music. Lyrically, they explored themes of social alienation, personal struggle, and disillusionment with the American dream, resonating with a generation grappling with the uncertainties of a rapidly changing world. The emergence of nu metal coincided with a growing sense of social and political unrest. The Cold War had ended, but a new era of uncertainty had begun. Economic inequality was on the rise, social divisions were widening, and a sense of apathy and cynicism pervaded youth culture. Nu metal provided an outlet for this pent-up frustration and anger. At the forefront of the nu metal explosion stood Korn, a band whose raw, uncompromising sound and deeply personal lyrics would capture the hearts and minds of a generation. Formed in Bakersfield, California in 1993, Korn tapped into a vein of raw emotion and vulnerability rarely seen in heavy metal. Led by vocalist Jonathan Davis, whose tortured screams and introspective lyrics laid bare his own personal demons, Korn's music was a visceral outpouring of pain, anger, and alienation. Their sound, characterized by down-tuned 7-string guitars, syncopated rhythms, and Davis's use of the bagpipes, was both innovative and unsettling. Their self-titled debut album, released in 1994, was a sonic gut punch that announced their arrival on the music scene. Songs like Blind, Clown, and Daddy, with their unflinchingly honest lyrics about child abuse, bullying, and social alienation, struck a chord with listeners who felt like outsiders, misunderstood and marginalized. Korn's music was not for the faint of heart. It was raw, visceral, and often deeply unsettling. But it was also cathartic, providing a voice for those who felt like they had none. Their music created a sense of community among their fans, a shared understanding of pain and alienation that transcended social and cultural boundaries. Nu metal was a melting pot of genres, drawing inspiration from diverse sources to create a sound that was both familiar and entirely new. Bands like Limp Bizkit, with their blend of heavy riffs and hip-hop beats, and Linkin Park, who seamlessly fused metal with electronica and rap, further expanded the sonic possibilities of the genre. One of the defining characteristics of nu metal was the use of down-tuned 7-string guitars, which created a heavier, more dissonant sound. Bands like Korn, Deftones, and Slipknot incorporated these instruments into their music, adding a new dimension of heaviness and aggression. Rhythmically, nu metal often borrowed from hip-hop and funk, incorporating syncopated beats and groove-oriented riffs. This departure from traditional metal drumming gave nu metal a distinct bounce and swagger. Vocal styles in nu metal were also diverse, ranging from Jonathan Davis's tortured screams to Fred Durst's rapping and Chester Bennington's soaring melodies. This eclectic mix of influences gave nu metal a unique sonic identity. It was heavy and aggressive, but also melodic and groove-oriented. It was dark and brooding, but also anthemic and cathartic. This sonic diversity helped to broaden the appeal of heavy metal, attracting a new generation of fans who might not have otherwise embraced the genre. A culture of outsiders fashion, identity, and the nu metal aesthetic. Nu metal wasn't just a musical genre, it was a cultural phenomenon that spawned its own unique fashion, attitude, and lifestyle. The visual aesthetic of nu metal was a rejection of the traditional heavy metal look of long hair, leather, and studs. Instead, nu metal bands embraced a more casual, street-inspired style. Baggy jeans, oversized t-shirts, hooded sweatshirts, and backwards baseball caps became the uniform of the nu metal generation. Body piercings, tattoos, and brightly colored hair were also common, reflecting a desire for self-expression and a rejection of societal norms. This embrace of a more casual, everyday look made nu metal more accessible to a wider audience. It broke down the barriers between performer and fan, creating a sense of unity and belonging among those who felt like outsiders. The fashion of nu metal was a visual representation of the music's message, a rejection of conformity, a celebration of individuality, and a sense of solidarity among the disenfranchised. Beyond the mainstream, nu metal's enduring impact. By the early 2000s, nu metal had exploded into the mainstream. Bands like Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park, and Korn were selling millions of albums, headlining major festivals, and dominating MTV's airwaves. However, the genre's popularity was short-lived. As the decade progressed, nu metal faced criticism for its perceived commercialism and lack of originality. The genre's signature sound, once fresh and innovative, became increasingly formulaic. By the mid-2000s, nu metal's mainstream popularity had waned. However, the genre's influence could still be felt in the music of countless bands that followed. Nu metal's legacy is complex and multifaceted. It pushed the boundaries of heavy metal, incorporating elements of other genres and exploring new sonic territories. It gave a voice to a generation struggling with alienation, anger, and disillusionment, and it challenged the conventions of what heavy metal could be, both musically and culturally. While nu metal's time in the mainstream spotlight may have been relatively brief, its impact on heavy metal and popular music as a whole is undeniable. Its influence can still be heard in the music of countless bands today, a testament to the genre's enduring power and its ability to connect with listeners on a deeply personal level. The crossover appeal, nu metal's influence on other genres. Nu metal, despite its relatively short reign at the forefront of popular music, had a profound impact on the musical landscape. Its influence wasn't confined to the realm of heavy metal, it seeped into other genres, blurring boundaries and inspiring a new wave of experimentation. Artists from diverse backgrounds began incorporating elements of nu metal into their music, attracted to its raw energy, emotional vulnerability, and genre-bending sensibilities. Pop music, often seen as the antithesis of heavy metal, wasn't immune to nu metal's reach. Artists like Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and *NSYNC incorporated heavier guitars, distorted vocals, and darker lyrical themes into their music, appealing to a wider audience and challenging the conventions of pop stardom. This crossover appeal demonstrated the universality of nu metal's themes of angst, alienation, and rebellion. Hip-hop, a genre with its own roots in rebellion and social commentary, found common ground with nu metal's aggressive energy and rhythmic experimentation. Artists like Eminem, Jay-Z, and Linkin Park collaborated on tracks that blended rap verses with heavy riffs and electronic textures, creating a hybrid sound that resonated with fans of both genres. This fusion of styles further blurred the lines between musical categories, paving the way for a more fluid and inclusive musical landscape. Even alternative rock, a genre often associated with introspection and melodic sensibility, felt the impact of nu metal's raw power. Bands like Foo Fighters, Incubus, and Deftones incorporated heavier guitars, syncopated rhythms, and a more aggressive vocal delivery into their music, adding a new dimension to their sound and expanding their audience. This cross-pollination of genres demonstrated the far-reaching influence of nu metal and its ability to transcend musical boundaries. Hybrid vigor, the rise of genre-bending bands. The influence of nu metal wasn't limited to subtle sonic nods or stylistic borrowings. It spawned a new generation of bands that embraced genre bending as their defining characteristic. These artists, raised on a diverse diet of musical influences, refused to be confined by the traditional boundaries of genre, seamlessly blending elements of metal, hip-hop, electronic music, and beyond. Bands like System of a Down, with their politically charged lyrics, experimental song structures, and unique blend of Armenian folk music and heavy metal, defied categorization. Their music was a chaotic yet cohesive mix of aggression and melody, humor and social commentary, reflecting the complexities of the human experience. Linkin Park, with their fusion of soaring melodies, rap verses, electronic textures, and heavy guitars, achieved mainstream success while pushing the boundaries of rock music. Their ability to seamlessly blend seemingly disparate genres resonated with a generation raised on musical diversity, proving that experimentation and accessibility weren't mutually exclusive. Deftones, with their atmospheric soundscapes, ethereal vocals, and blend of shoegaze, trip-hop, and heavy metal, created a unique and haunting sonic landscape. Their music was both beautiful and brutal, melodic and dissonant, reflecting the duality of human emotion. These bands, and countless others, demonstrated the enduring legacy of nu metal's experimental spirit and its role in shaping the sound of 21st century music. A new wave of experimentation, nu metal's legacy in the 21st century. As the 21st century progressed, nu metal's influence continued to reverberate throughout the musical landscape. Its spirit of experimentation and genre bending lived on, inspiring a new generation of artists to challenge conventions and push the boundaries of heavy music. The rise of djent, with its polyrhythmic riffs and down-tuned guitars, owed a debt to nu metal's rhythmic experimentation. Bands like Meshuggah and Periphery took these elements to new extremes, creating complex and technically dazzling music. Metalcore also incorporated elements of nu metal, particularly its use of breakdowns and melodic vocals. Bands like Killswitch Engage bridged the gap between metal's aggression and hardcore's raw intensity. Nu metal's influence could be felt in the rise of genres like trap metal, blending heavy bass with aggressive vocals. Artists like XXXTentacion blurred the lines between hip-hop and metal, creating a dark and often nihilistic sound. Nu metal's legacy continues to inspire musicians across a wide range of genres.
A revolution's echoes the enduring power of heavy music. From the raw, rebellious cry of rock and roll in the 1950s to the sonic firestorm of nu metal in the 1990s, heavy music has been a constant force of evolution and revolution. Each generation embraced its own brand of sonic rebellion, finding a voice in the power chords and thunderous drums. These weren't just genres, they were cultural movements, uniting millions under the banner of amplified sound. Black Sabbath's ominous riffs dragged rock into the shadows, exploring the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. Metallica's thrash metal assault injected speed and aggression, reflecting the anxieties of a generation grappling with political turmoil. And Korn's nu metal angst gave voice to the voiceless, tapping into a wellspring of emotional vulnerability and societal discontent. Each era of heavy music shattered the status quo, pushing creative boundaries and challenging societal norms. The music provided a sanctuary for outsiders, a place where anger and alienation could be channeled into cathartic release. It was a sonic middle finger to the establishment, a defiant roar against conformity and apathy. The beat goes on, rock's unbreakable spirit. While musical trends may ebb and flow, the spirit of rock and roll, that unyielding pursuit of freedom and self-expression, continues to resonate. The genres it birthed, from heavy metal to nu metal, may have experienced their peaks and valleys of popularity, but their influence continues to shape the sonic landscape. New bands emerge, drawing inspiration from the pioneers who came before, carrying the torch of rebellion into uncharted musical territory. They blend genres, experiment with sounds, and pour their hearts out on stage, proving that the desire for authentic expression never fades. The legacy of rock and roll and its heavier offspring is not confined to museums or history books. It's a living, breathing entity, constantly evolving and inspiring new generations of musicians and fans. It's the sound of rebellion, the rhythm of defiance, the unwavering belief that music has the power to change the world, one power chord at a time.